This is my original 1980 The Shining movie poster. This episode is all about The Shining, and it's about Stanley Kubrick and something that Stanley's daughter, Vivian Kubrick, told Alex Jones. Now, I believe it to be legitimate. I believe it to be the truth, and it's a pretty out there story.
Man, I tell you, the stuff I learned about Stanley Kubrick, I'm not allowed to tell anybody, but it's mind-blowing. I mean, you notice he's also, in The Shining's all about being psychic. And, you know, the Kubrick, and the stuff she was telling me I already had known because I'd read a few books about him. I'm, obviously really into him, especially decades ago. I don't want to waste our time here together, but sometime I'm not going to tell you the stuff, obviously, that was in Congress, but just the generality of it, that the CIA, the FBI kept visiting him saying, how do you know this? How do you know this? And he didn't really have contacts. Kubrick just knew. I'm not going to say any more.
My name is Vivian Kubrick. My father was Stanley Kubrick. I live here in Dallas. That there are really some things that you have to fight very hard for. And my father's an artist, fought very hard for the integrity of his films, because even he was subject to a lot of pressure to not make the films he made.
What would your dad, I know you're taking that question, but I'd love to know, what would your dad, with his great artist mind, to see real reality, what would he think about what America's turned into? Because his films predicted it.
Well, I was saying to you last night, I feel that my father was very haunted by those factions on this planet that try to manipulate humanity. I think the films that he made, he wanted people to think for themselves, experience for themselves, whatever it meant to them. But I would say that if you look at every film he made, it certainly addressed all these things that we're speaking about. I mean, Clockwork Orange, thought control, you know, anti-war films, the fact that war is just pure slaughter, that it's got nothing to do with any of the usual things that they send people out.
Dr. Strangelove?
Yellow.
And so what do we do?
I think we actually have to take on, and this is the hard part, everyone, you're going to have to operate using your own awareness, your own, you have to think for yourself.
Stanley Kubrick himself had the Shining ability, which is why he chose the Stephen King novel to adapt to a screenplay. The screenplay was by Stanley Kubrick and Diane Johnson. Now, I have not read the book by Stephen King, but I did watch the movie directed by Stephen King, written by Stephen King, the TV movie, miniseries. It was very long. I believe it was around 6 hours long. I watched the entire thing. So anyone that watches that 6 hour long miniseries where Nuttin' Honey is the main running joke written by Stephen King, they pretty much read the book, because that 6 hour miniseries is based on Stephen King's book more perfectly and closely and thoroughly, as opposed to the adapted screenplay, expertly, genius, flawlessly adapted and written and perfected by Stanley Kubrick and Diane Johnson. So basically, what Kubrick did is he made the movie into an actual suspense masterpiece. Now, modern day horror fans don't consider it a horror movie, and I can understand why. It's more of a suspense movie. I mean, it's very vaguely a horror movie based on today's jaded standards. In my opinion, the most masterful suspense movie ever made. I've watched the movie The Shining, we're talking around 15 times. And I've picked up on a lot of details, and I'm going to be talking about them in a future episode where I analyze the entire movie. This episode is about how Stanley Kubrick had the Shining ability. And for those that haven't seen the movie, Shining is another word for a psychic ability to be able to sense things that happened in the past, have premonitions of things that are going to happen in the future, telepathically be able to communicate long distances within an instant, a psychic ability which allows you to see the dead, allows you to live in the Twilight Zone. According to Vivian Kubrick, who was interviewed by Alex Jones, Stanley Kubrick had this psychic shining ability. After knowing that information, I need to rewatch The Shining a couple times so I can really see glimpses of what Stanley Kubrick saw, perhaps on a daily, monthly, yearly basis. I mentioned in a previous video how I'm a little bit psychic. The reason I watched The Shining 15 times and why it's up there in my top 2 favorite movies of all time. I go between Clockwork Orange and The Shining. Those are my 2 favorite movies of all time, have been ever since I watched them. I always resonated with The Shining, possibly because I'm a little bit psychic. Now, I never would claim to be as psychic as Stanley Kubrick because apparently he knew the codes, the secret government codes that he spoofed in the movie Dr. Strangelove. According to Alex Jones, after having spoken with Vivian Kubrick, Stanley Kubrick psychically, just randomly, would guess things that became true and were correct. Almost remote viewing type abilities. And I am going to do a remote viewing episode in the future, as I did take 2 remote viewing tests, and I'm going to show you the results that I got. I thank you for watching. This has been John Razimus with the John Razimus Paranormal Occult Research Channel. Be seeing you.